A woman can save 100 hearts in a single week and still have no idea how to save her own. The October wind came off Lake Ontario, cold and without mercy, the kind that cut through expensive wool and found the skin underneath. Natalie Byrne stepped out of her car and stood in the empty parking lot of Harborfront Park. For the 7th evening in a row, her hospital lanyard still around her neck, her dinner still uneaten in a paper bag on the passenger seat. At 47, she was one of the most respected cardiac surgeons at Toronto General. She had repaired hearts no one else would touch. She had stood over operating tables for 12, 15, 18 hours and come out the other side with her hands steady and her mind clear. Her colleagues called her unshakable. Her residents called her the best they'd ever trained under. The hospital had named a cardiac care wing, after a donation she'd made 5 years ago, back when life had still felt like something that could be planned. But Natalie came to this park every evening because her apartment was too quiet, and quiet was the thing that undid her. 9 months ago her daughter Megan had called her at 11 at night. Natalie had been in the middle of a post-operative debrief that could not wait, or at least she had told herself it could not wait. She had seen Megan's name light up the screen. She had thought, "I'll call back in 10 minutes. She had not called back in 10 minutes. By morning Megan was gone, 22 years old, alone in her apartment across the city. 3 years of a battle her mother had understood in the distant clinical way that a surgeon understood addiction, as a condition, a set of risk factors, something that happened to other people's families. She had not known how scared Megan was. She had not known her daughter still kept the stuffed rabbit from childhood in her bed, or that she phoned her university friends every Sunday, or that she had written her mother a letter every month for 2 years, and never sent a single one. Natalie had found the letters in a shoebox under the bed. She had read every one once. Then she had put the shoebox in the closet and closed the door and had not opened it since, because opening it felt like bleeding in a room with no walls. The park asked nothing of her. That was why she kept coming. The lake was dark and indifferent. The geese had gone south for the season. The benches were empty by this hour, and the city lights across the water were far enough away to look peaceful. Natalie sat on the same bench near the waterline every night, pulled her coat tighter, and let herself stop performing. During the day she performed competence and steadiness, and the warm professional calm her patients needed. She signed charts and answered questions and operated with the same precision that had defined her career for 20 years. Nobody knew, nobody saw. She had not told a single person at the hospital what had happened to Megan. Only that she had experienced a personal loss and required a brief leave. She had returned to work before anyone expected her. People had stopped asking. She was grateful for that. In the cold specific way she was grateful for most things now. Natalie pulled Megan's old phone case from her coat pocket. Just a piece of teal silicone worn at one corner where Megan had picked at it whenever she was anxious. A cheap, ordinary thing worth nothing. Natalie had not been able to put it in a drawer. It was the only object that still felt warm to the touch, though she knew that wasn't possible. She held it in both hands and watched the water. Then she heard footsteps, small ones. A boy appeared from the direction of the walking path, moving with the deliberate carefulness of a child, who had learned not to waste energy. He was perhaps 8 years old, wearing a jacket one size too large and a hand-knit scarf wrapped twice around his neck and chin. Soft gray wool clearly belonging to a woman, faded and well-loved, fraying gently at one end. He carried a paper bag from a convenience store. He stopped a few feet from the bench and looked at Natalie with calm brown eyes that did not match his age. "Do you miss someone too, lady?" he asked. Natalie stared at him. "You're crying," he added without accusation. She touched her face. She had not known she was crying. "I'm fine," she said, the reflex answer, the one she had given for 9 months. The boy sat down on the far end of the bench without asking permission. He put his paper bag between his feet and unwrapped the scarf slightly, breathing into it once as if drawing something from the fabric. "I come here because my mom used to bring me," he said. "She told me if you ever miss me, come here and I'll be here even if I can't come." Natalie looked at him carefully. "Where is your mother?" "Hospital," he said. He said it the way children say words they've had to learn too young, steadily with none of the weight showing on the surface. "St. Michael's. She got sick in the summer. Cancer." "I'm sorry," Natalie said. He nodded. Then he looked at her sideways. "You didn't answer. Do you miss someone?" She looked down at the teal phone case in her hands. "Yes," she said. "Who?" She had not said it out loud. Not once, not in 9 months, not to her colleagues or her sister or the grief counselor she had seen exactly twice before canceling the appointments. "My daughter," she said. The word broke something small and necessary open in her chest. "Did she move away?" he asked. Natalie's throat closed. "She died." The boy was quiet for a moment. The water moved. Somewhere across the park a dog barked once and stopped. How old was she? He asked. 22. He seemed to consider this with genuine seriousness. That's not very old. No, Natalie said, it isn't. My mom is 40, he said. She says that's plenty old enough to fight back. A small pause. I think she's scared though. She tries not to let me see. Natalie turned toward him. What's your name? Felix. I'm Natalie. He examined her coat, her lanyard, her hands. Are you a doctor? Yes. What kind? Heart surgeon. Felix thought about this. Can you fix my mom's kind of sick? The question hit her cleanly and without warning. Not because she didn't have an answer but because of the complete trust underneath it. Children ask that question the way adults never did. Not as a demand, not as desperation but as a genuine inquiry. Maybe you can. Maybe you know something. I'm not that kind of doctor, Natalie said gently. But there are very good ones. He nodded, accepting this without complaint. He reached into his bag and pulled out a granola bar. He looked at it, then at her. Are you hungry? I only have one but you can have half. Natalie looked at the granola bar, then at this boy, 8 years old in an oversized jacket, offering her half his food at 9 o'clock at night beside a dark lake in October. Felix, she said quietly, what are you doing out here alone this late? He shrugged with one shoulder. My neighbor, Mrs. Okonkwo, she watches me in the evenings, but she falls asleep early. I come out after. He said this the way a child explains a system they've invented for themselves, practically without self-pity. It's easier to be sad here than in the apartment. The apartment just has the empty chair. Natalie understood that, exactly that. My apartment has an empty room, she said before she'd decided to say it. I haven't opened the door. Felix looked at her. Why? Because I don't know what to do with what's inside it. He unwrapped the granola bar and broke it with care. Extending the larger piece toward her, she started to refuse. He kept holding it out, patient and entirely serious. She took it. They sat eating in the kind of companionable silence that usually takes years to build between two people. My mom's scarf, Felix said, touching the gray wool at his throat. She gave it to me when she went in. She said her smell would stay in it for a while. I try not to wash it. A pause. Does that sound weird? Natalie's eyes filled. No, she said, it doesn't sound weird at all. What do you carry? She looked down at the teal phone case. Without thinking, she placed it on her knee where he could see it. Her phone case, she said. My daughter's. She picked it because she said teal was the color of something between sad and happy. I didn't know what she meant at the time. Felix looked at it for a moment. I think I understand that. She used to call me, Natalie said. Her voice was steady but only barely. I didn't always answer when I should have. She called me the night she died. I saw her name. I was in the middle of something. I thought I'd call back in 10 minutes. The silence stretched between them. I've been trying to figure out how to put that down, Natalie said softly. For 9 months, how to carry it differently. Felix unwrapped the end of his scarf and smoothed it across his knee. He looked at the fraying wool, very serious. My mom said something, he said. She said people who help other people sometimes forget they're allowed to need help too. He glanced up at Natalie. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe your daughter knew you were helping someone else. Maybe she didn't want you to feel bad. What broke in Natalie's chest was not loud, not dramatic, a single quiet split like ice settling on a river in early spring. Not violent, just a giving way. She covered her mouth with one hand. Tears ran down her face in the cold air. Felix did not look away. He also did not try to stop her or say it would be okay. He sat there small and steady, the gray scarf around his neck, and let her feel it. I'm sorry you didn't get to tell her you were scared too, he said at last. Natalie pressed her hand harder against her mouth and breathed. The boy was 8 years old. He lived in an apartment with an empty chair and a sleeping neighbor and a mother fighting cancer 2 hospitals away. He had come to a park in the dark to feel less alone. With a scarf he refused to wash so it would keep the smell of the person he might lose. And here he was, sitting beside a stranger he'd known for 6 minutes, offering her half a granola bar and the only comfort he had. Natalie looked at the lake for a long moment. Felix, she said, when did you last eat a proper meal? He considered this with the same honesty he brought to everything. Mrs. Okonkwo made soup yesterday. I had the rest this morning. A pause. The granola bar was from the store. I have some money my mom left in an envelope. She looked at his jacket. The zipper was broken at the bottom, held together by a small safety pin. His shoes were dry. He had been careful about the wet patches along the path, but thin. How far is your apartment? 10 minutes. I walk. She stood up slowly. She felt unsteady, not from the cold but from the unfamiliar weight of having been seen by someone who had no reason to look. Come with me, she said. I have food, warm food, a proper kitchen. Felix looked up at her. My mom told me not to go anywhere with people I don't know, he said carefully. She was absolutely right, Natalie answered. He tilted his head. Then why are you asking me? Because you offered me half your granola bar, and because you asked me something nobody else has asked me in 9 months. And because, she stopped. The real reason. Because I think you need more than a granola bar tonight. He studied her for a long moment in the way children did when deciding whether an adult could be trusted, not by credentials or appearance, but by something harder to name. Then he picked up his paper bag, stood, and rewrapped the gray scarf around his neck. Okay, he said, but I have to text Mrs. Okonkwo so she doesn't worry. Yes, Natalie said, text Mrs. Okonkwo. Her condo was 20 minutes away in a building on Queens Quay, with a view of the lake she had not looked at in 9 months. The lobby was warm. Felix stood beside her in the elevator looking at everything without comment. The concierge desk, the potted ferns, the floor numbers, in the composed way of a child who had decided not to be impressed by things that weren't the point. She opened the door and the apartment opened around them, silent and immaculate and slightly airless, the way rooms felt when no one truly lived in them anymore. Felix stood in the entryway. It's very clean, he said. I have someone come in, Natalie said, otherwise I'd forget. My apartment is messy, he said without apology. My mom says a messy home means people live there. Natalie stopped walking toward the kitchen. She stood still for a moment. Then she said, she sounds like someone worth knowing. She is, Felix said very simply. She found him dry socks, and he put them on without being asked twice, sitting on the entryway bench, and looking at his feet with brief satisfaction before following her to the kitchen. Felix sat at the kitchen island on a bar stool, slightly too high for him, feet hanging, and looked around at the appliances and clean counters, and the bowl of apples that had been sitting so long they were beginning to wrinkle. You have a lot of things, he observed. I do. My mom says having lots of things isn't the same as having what you need. Natalie opened the refrigerator. It looked like a photograph of a grocery store, full, organized, untouched. She's right, Natalie said. She heated soup. She made toast with butter and cut it in triangles the way she dimly remembered her own mother doing when she was small. She sliced an apple and arranged it on a plate. She poured a glass of milk and then thought about it, and poured herself one as well, because she had not had milk in 9 months, and could not have said why. Felix accepted the plate with both hands and set it carefully in front of him. He looked at it for a moment, not greedily, but with the composed assessment of a child who had learned that abundance wasn't permanent. This is a lot, he said. You can eat all of it. He picked up the spoon and tried the soup, his eyes closed for exactly 1 second. It's really good, he said. It's from a can, Natalie said. It's warm, he said, that's what makes it good. She sat across from him and watched him eat. It occurred to her that she had not watched another person eat in 9 months. She had not sat across a table from another human being and simply been present since Megan's last birthday dinner. A year and 2 months ago. A restaurant in Yorkville where Natalie had answered her phone twice at the table, and told herself she'd make it up to her daughter next time. There was no next time. There had never been a next time waiting. She had simply believed in it, the way people believed in things they'd never actually checked. Felix wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Can I ask you something? Yes. Did your daughter know you loved her? The question landed with quiet, devastating precision. Natalie looked at her hands around the glass. I think so, she said. I hope so. Her voice thinned. I didn't say it enough. I kept thinking there was more time. Felix was quiet for a moment then. I tell my mom every day now, even if it makes her cry. I figure it's better to cry and hear it than to not hear it. Natalie could not speak. She always says it back, he added. She has to take a breath first, but she always says it back. The kitchen was very still. Somewhere in the building a door closed. The refrigerator hummed. October pushed against the windows with cold and patient insistence. Natalie looked at Megan's phone case, still in her coat pocket. She had spent 9 months believing that grief and love were the same thing, that to grieve deeply was to love correctly, that staying broken was the only honest response to what she had lost. She had made her silence into a kind of devotion. But this boy sitting at her kitchen island in her socks with soup on his chin, told his mother he loved her every single day, even now, especially now, not because everything was fine, but because everything was not fine and he knew it, and he chose to say it anyway. That was not weakness. That was the bravest thing Natalie had heard in 9 months. She stood and went to the hallway closet. She had not opened it since placing the shoebox inside. She opened it now, reached past the coats, brought the box out and set it on the kitchen counter. Felix watched her without speaking. Her letters, Natalie said. She wrote to me every month, she never sent them. She ran her fingers along the lid. I read them once, then I put them away. What did she say? She talked about her day, what she was reading, what she was afraid of. A pause. She said she knew I was busy. She said she understood. She said she was proud of me. Her voice broke on the last sentence. She was proud of you? Felix said. Yes. He considered this with visible seriousness. Then she knew. He said she knew, and she was still proud. That means she didn't blame you. Natalie pressed her hand flat on top of the box. Children did not soften things. They said what they understood, and sometimes what they understood reached places that years of careful adult reasoning could not. She breathed in, she breathed out. My mom wrote me a note, Felix said. Before she went to the hospital she said, Felix, I need you to be brave, but brave doesn't mean not crying. Brave means crying and then making breakfast anyway. He picked up his toast and bit into it with a small nod of satisfaction. So every morning I cry a little, and then I make breakfast. Natalie laughed. It came out before she could stop it. A short, raw, helpless sound, and then she covered her mouth, and Felix grinned at her with toast in his hand, and for one extraordinary moment the kitchen felt like a place where two people actually lived. Can I ask you something? Natalie said. He nodded, chewing. The doctor's taking care of your mother at St. Michael's. What have they told you about the treatment? Felix's expression shifted, not to fear but to the careful neutrality of a child repeating information he had memorized precisely because it frightened him. They said there are more options, but some cost a lot and the insurance only covers part. Mrs. Okonkwo has been helping but she's worried. What's your mother's name? Amara, he said. Amara Selwyn. Natalie looked at him. She thought about the shoebox on the counter. She thought about Megan's letters. She thought about a phone screen lighting up at 11 at night, and a woman who didn't answer. She could not call Megan back. She could not add 10 more minutes to the time she had taken for granted. That door was closed and was never going to open, and she had been standing in front of it for 9 months treated. As if it were the only truth the world contained. But Felix was here. Amara Selwyn was at St. Michael's Hospital 2 kilometers away, and Natalie Byrne knew every oncologist in this city by their first name. Felix, she said, I'd like to make some calls about your mother, tomorrow morning. I know people at St. Michael's. I can't promise anything but I can ask questions and I can open doors that don't open easily. She paused. Would that be all right with you? He stared at her. She watched the calculation happen behind his eyes, hope arriving before he'd decided whether to trust it. You'd really do that? Yes. Why? Natalie looked at the phone case in her coat pocket, at the shoebox, at the gray scarf Felix had draped over the bar stool beside him, like a guest given a seat at the table. Because, she said carefully, I have spent 9 months with a heart full of grief and both hands empty, and I think it's time I used my hands for something. Felix was quiet for a long moment. My mom says the only way to stop being afraid is to do something helpful, he said at last. She sounds very wise. She reads a lot. He finished the last of his soup and set the spoon down neatly. Can I see a picture of your daughter? Natalie hesitated. Then she pulled out her own phone. A photo she kept in an album she opened only when the silence became completely unbearable. She turned the screen toward him. Megan was laughing. It was from a picnic 2 summers ago, wind in her hair, her face completely open and unguarded. Natalie had taken it without announcing she was going to. She had thought at the time, I want to remember her like this. She had not known she would need it to remember her at all. She has your eyes, Felix said. Yes, Natalie said, she does. She looks happy in that one. She was a pause. She was happy, and she was scared, and she loved bad movies, and she always left the cap off the toothpaste, and she called her friends every Sunday morning. Natalie felt tears on her face again, but this time her voice stayed level. She was a whole person. I should have said that more often, that I saw her. The whole of her. Felix reached across the island and placed his hand, very small, very careful, over hers. He did not say anything. He simply left it there. Natalie looked at his hand on hers. The gray scarf hung over the bar stool. The shoebox sat on the counter. Outside, October pressed against the windows. She had come to the park to sit in the dark and be left alone with her grief. She had found instead, a boy in a borrowed scarf, who offered strangers half a granola bar and told his mother he loved her every morning even when it made them both cry. She did not know if what was cracking open inside her was healing. She wasn't sure she believed in that word yet, but something was moving that had not moved in 9 months. Some locked and stubborn thing beginning to consider the possibility of the next room, the next morning, the next door that had not yet been tried. It's late, she said gently, you should sleep. Felix looked up. I can go home. There's a guest room, she said. If you want to call Mrs. Okonkwo and let her know you're safe. he considered. She'll want to know it's a real place. I can talk to her. He nodded slowly, and then very seriously, will you still be here in the morning? The question broke over her quietly, like water finding its way under a door. Yes, she said. I'll be here. And after breakfast I'm going to make some phone calls about your mother. Felix looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up the gray scarf and wrapped it once around his neck, and Natalie understood. The scarf was not staying on the bar stool. The scarf went where he went. Some things you did not set down just because you found somewhere warm to sit. She understood that now. The guest room had a window that faced the lake. Felix sat on the edge of the bed and tested the mattress with both hands, then looked up at her. This is a really good bed, he said. Sleep well, she said. Natalie. He said her name the way he had the first time, carefully giving both syllables equal weight. She paused at the door. I'm glad you were at the park, he said. She stood in the hallway with her hand on the doorframe, and for the first time in 9 months the silence in the apartment felt different. Not empty. Inhabited. So am I, Felix, she said, so am I. She went to the kitchen and opened the shoebox and sat down at the counter and read her daughter's letters again. Not once this time, but slowly, the way they deserved to be read. She read about Megan's Tuesday cooking disasters, and her Sunday phone calls, and the playlist she'd made during a hard week in March, and the way the cherry trees on her street looked every April. She read a daughter reporting the life she was living to a mother she believed in, even when that mother wasn't watching. At the bottom of the last letter, in handwriting smaller than the rest, were 6 words. I know you're trying, Mom, always. Natalie closed the box. She did not put it back in the closet. She left it on the counter, where she could see it, in the morning. 6 months later, Amara Selwyn walked out of St. Michael's Hospital under her own strength. Her treatment fully covered through a private fund Natalie had arranged through colleagues who owed her favors, and people who simply believed her when she said this mattered. Felix was standing outside the hospital doors, still in the oversized jacket, the gray scarf around his neck. He ran and his mother caught him, and they stood in the February cold holding each other in the practical, unsentimental way of people who have survived something real together. Natalie stood a few feet back, giving them the moment, but Amara looked up over Felix's shoulder and found her eyes and nodded once. A nod that carried everything that needed to be said. That winter Felix began spending weekends at the condo on Queens Quay, at first because his mother was recovering and needed rest, and then because all 3 of them had quietly agreed, without formally saying so, that some families were built in a park in October by a boy with half a granola bar and a question no one else had thought to ask. Natalie kept the shoebox on the kitchen counter from that night forward. She still carried Megan's phone case in her coat pocket. Some griefs did not end. They changed shape, became less wall and more window, found a way to let the light through without pretending the glass wasn't there. The guest room had someone to sleep in it now. The empty chair at the table had become a chair where a child sat and talked with his mouth full, and asked questions she had needed to hear for a very long time. And every morning, before she called the hospital, before she made coffee, before she opened the blinds on the lake, Natalie Byrne said out loud the thing she should have said more often, and had not said enough. Because Felix had taught her that brave did not mean not crying. Brave meant crying and then making breakfast anyway. And in that small, ordinary, radical act she had found her way back. If you've ever had someone ask you exactly the right question at exactly the wrong moment, leave it in the comments. I'd really like to hear it. And if this story stayed with you tonight, stay close to this channel. The next one is already waiting. It might be the one your heart has been looking for.